Welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Cincinnati. My name is Reverend Connie Simon, and I'm glad you're here today. Here at First Church, we welcome all with love, support learning and spiritual growth, serve our wider community, and work for justice, equity, and inclusion. If you'd like to know more about us or would like to receive an email each week with the link to our online services, please send a notice to member-care@firstuu.com. That email address is on our website as well. Even though we're physically distanced, there's still lots going on at First Church. Today after service, we'll have our inaugural First Sunday conversation. These monthly conversations are an opportunity for our members and visitors to share what's on their mind, and for our Board of Trustees and me to let you know what's going on here at the church. This conversation will happen in the coffee hour space on Zoom. If you choose not to participate in the large conversation and would like to be in a smaller coffee hour group, we can make those arrangements for you. Also, Coffee Hour with Reverend Connie and Happy Hour with Reverend Connie are back. This week, we'll have those on Wednesday at 9 a.m. That's the coffee part. And the Happy Hour on Thursday evening at 8 o'clock p.m. Also, our second annual People Who Get Things Done Awards are coming up. We'll have those on June 21st during service. If you want to recognize someone in our community, anyone in the community, they don't have to be a member, and you can recognize them for anything, serious or tongue-in-cheek, now is the time. Send me your nominations by June 19th. Thank you. Our chalice is still lit, and it will remain so as long as we are in the midst of this turmoil and protest and mess that we find ourselves in. And still we'll begin with some words of inspiration and spirit by Reverend Christian Smith. Let us wake up, not just from the Sunday morning exhaustion, from the wish for a few more drowsy minutes in bed. Let us wake up to this world we live in, to its beauty and wonder, and also to its tragedy and pain. We must wake up in this reality that not all in our world have what we do, however much or how little that is. We must wake up to the idea that our wholeness, our lives, are only as complete as the lives of those around us, of those we are inextricably tied to in a great web of mutuality, of which all of us are part. We must stay woke, in the words of our friends and colleagues involved in Black Lives Matter, working every day for racial justice in our community. Let us wake up. Let us stay awake. Let us stay woke. And now, in this time and place, let us worship together.
Hi, I'm Meredith Plummer, and welcome to my Storytime studio.
In a wet and cold stream bed, underneath a meadow bridge, lived a troll named Arg. Now, in case you don't remember about trolls, let's do a bit of review. What are trolls like? Well, they're smelly and dirty, and they love to lounge in muddy, disgusting water under bridges. It's even better if the water is cold. And they eat gross, repulsive things like worm fricassee and snail sauce and snake bladder stew. Ugh. And of course, they're irritable. But I suppose you would be too if you ate that kind of stuff every day. And what do trolls do? They sit in their stream beds, waiting until fat goats come tripping over the bridge. Then they climb up onto the bridge, grab the goats, and eat them up. Or at least, they try to. Our story begins one day in the meadow. Arg was down in the stream bed, sipping some ant juice, when he heard the sound of hooves tripping over the bridge. It sounded like a nice fat goat, a much better dinner than what was available down in the stream. So he climbed up along the side of the bridge, stuck out his big old head to look. He was about to growl in his gravelly troll voice, "Who's that tripping over my bridge?" when he heard another troll voice, a higher, squeakier one, saying, "Aha! Who's that tripping over my bridge?" Arg was startled. He looked across to the other side of the bridge, and sure enough, there was another troll head sticking up. This troll, whose name was Tharg, was a bit smaller than Arg, but every bit as dirty, smelly, and loud. What was she doing here? Arg was not happy. "Hey, I troll the bridge," he shouted. "This is my bridge, go away!" "What?" shrieked Tharg. "No way! I troll a bridge! I catch goat and eat for supper!" "You catch goat? Ha! You too weak and small! I catch goat," said Arg. "No way!" Tharg said. "You two are out of shape! You never catch goat!" "Goat mine!" And with that, she started to climb up onto the top of the bridge to get the goat. But as she did, Arg grabbed a rock. He wound up his arm and let loose. Tharg tumbled right off the bridge. She went down, down, down into the stream, where she landed with a big splash. Arg stood there sticking out his tongue at Tharg, taunting her and making rude noises. Then he climbed up to get the goat. But the goat was gone, eating the nice green grass on the other side, and laughing at the trolls too. Tharg was mad. She pulled herself out of the stream, screaming the whole time. "You bad troll! You knocked me off bridge! That's very unfair! I get you for that!" Tharg started to climb up the bank, but as she did, another goat came tripping over the bridge. Once more, Arg stuck his big head over the side of the bridge and was about to say, "Who's that tripping over my bridge?" But Tharg pulled out her troll staff and whacked Arg in the head. Arg went down, down, down. He splashed into the stream, and Tharg stood there, thumbing her nose at him while he sputtered in the water. The goat, of course, went tripping over the bridge and off to eat some nice green grass. Well, now Arg was mad. He got up out of the muck and yelled, "Hey, this is my bridge! You no right to push me in river!" Tharg answered, "Oh yeah, very right. Number 1, you started it. Number 2, you steal my dinner. Number 3, I'm smarter, faster, braver than you. And number 4, nya, nya, nya." Now, as she was taunting Arg, a third goat came tripping onto the bridge, which of course didn't seem as dangerous as it used to. Arg grabbed his troll staff, and just as Tharg started to say, "Who's that tripping?" Arg whacked her in the head. But Tharg wasn't going down without a fight. As she fell, she grabbed Arg's foot, and when she tried to reach up and grab his hair, but she missed and grabbed his nose instead. Arg lost his footing, and he fell too. Down, 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 into the stream they both went, fighting the whole way, until they both hit the water with a tremendous splash. They sputtered up to the top of the water, punch and kicking, screaming at each other. "I right, you wrong," yelled Tharg. "No, I right, you wrong," yelled Arg. The more they fought, the more tangled they got. Arg got his finger stuck in Tharg's hair, and Tharg's big toe got stuck in Arg's nose. Tharg's ear got caught in Arg's elbow, and Arg's teeth landed in Tharg's elbow. They finally got themselves to the side of the stream, all tangled together, elbowing each other and kneeing each other and banging into each other and cursing at each other the whole way. They pulled themselves up onto the bank and stood there, totally exhausted. And the goat, of course, tripped over to the other side of the bridge and began eating the sweet grass there. Now all 3 goats stood there laughing at the trolls. Arg was furious. Tharg was furious. They shouted and screamed at each other and tried pushing each other, but they kept getting more entangled. Finally, they stopped. "This is your fault," screamed Arg. "That's not my fault," responded Tharg. "I innocent victim, and you mean a nasty troll." "Me mean and nasty? No, you mean and nasty. You evil. I get lawyer and sue your pants off." "Oh yeah? I get lawyer and sue your pants off." They started fighting again. And as they kept fighting, they got more and more tangled with their hair catching on each other's knuckles and their toes stuck in each other's noses. It went on like that until way, way late in the afternoon. As the sun set, the goats headed home, laughing all the way. And still the troll stood there by the stream. Now, the thing is, at this point, the trolls really had only two choices. They could keep fighting and get more tangled up and probably die of starvation. Or they could try something different to find a way out. What did they do? Well, you can go ask them, because they're still there on that stream bank, cursing at each other. "I right, you wrong. No, I right, you wrong." You see, they're trolls. They're not too bright. They're mean and nasty. They never forgive or consider others or do anything that doesn't benefit them. But we're people. If we were in this situation, we'd do something different, right? My question for you today is this: are people really so different from trolls? Share your thoughts during today's coffee hour or with your family and friends this week.
This is the time in our service when we pause to hold in our hearts those who have experienced sorrows and great joys this week. Somehow, it doesn't seem fitting to celebrate our more mundane joys in a time when the world is in such a state of unrest. So this morning, for joys and sorrows, I'm going to drop some stones for specific people and for things that are happening in our wider community. I drop a stone for George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, only the latest victims of police violence. I drop a handful of other stones for all those who have been victims of racial violence perpetrated by police and by others over the years. I drop a handful of stones for the police and the National Guard and the Bureau of Prisons and the local and state police who have all been called out to stand by these protests. I drop these stones in the hope that their hearts will be opened and that they will not use violence against those who are merely speaking out against injustice. I drop a handful of stones for our elected leaders, that they will find the wisdom and the courage to do what is right and what is just. I drop stones for each of us as individuals, that we may find the courage and the strength to do what is right and what is just. and I drop stones for all the black and brown people on the front lines, that their lives may not be squashed or taken violently in this society that we live in. This is for all of us, that we have the courage and the strength to go forward. For those we have named, for those whose names we do not know, and those whose names are carefully guarded in our hearts, let us now pause for a moment of silent meditation, reflection, prayer, after which we will sing Spirit of Life. This week, the violence of the looters abated, but not the rage or the passion or the determination of the protesters. I will admit that as a black person in this country, as a black UU in particular, I've seen white people take up the cause of racial justice over the years only to lay it down again when it felt too heavy, or got uncomfortable, or became inconvenient, or when they lost interest because some other cause like women's suffrage, Vietnam, same-sex marriage, or electing the first female president felt more important. But this time, it feels different. Look at who's out there protesting every day, and you'll see that it's different. Lord knows I really want it to be different. And I pray that my white neighbors and siblings won't break our black hearts yet again. Yesterday, I returned from a quick 48-hour trip to Philadelphia. I'd watched the images on television earlier in the week, the fire and the looting, but I was not prepared for what I saw when I got home. Whole shopping centers boarded up, grocery stores, gas stations, banks, beauty supply stores, mobile phone stores closed and boarded up. Whole blocks closed. Police chasing people off the streets at curfew. It was even worse in some areas because in addition to the looting, the Delaware Valley was hit by a very strong storm last Wednesday. So there were still uprooted trees from the storm littering many of the blocks. I have some photos for you of what Philadelphia looks like right now. The pictures that you see on this particular slide are from downtown Philadelphia, from Center City. The statue of William Penn is just 2 blocks from that orange and white striped cone. As you can see, the National Guard is standing by, making sure that no one goes where they're not supposed to be, at least in their thoughts. The next photo that you see is one up in the corner is the Target that is 2 blocks from where my sister lives, where we regularly shop. Not this time. The photo at the bottom, where the fire is burning, is the Apple Store at 1607 Walnut Street. I didn't take this picture, but I needed to include it because I used to work at 1619 Walnut Street, just a few doors down. The idea of being in the middle of that, the thought of being in the middle of that, is surreal. The large photo you see is of downtown burning. Here are 3 images that struck me as particularly upsetting. Friday morning, we went to the grocery store, to the fresh grocer. It's kind of like Kroger in Philadelphia. The photo at the bottom is what we saw in the parking lot. There were 6 Humvees and 3 police cars. We walked past soldiers brandishing automatic rifles. I realized this wasn't the normally quiet neighborhood of Winfield Heights. This was a war zone. Interestingly, right across the street from that Target are 2 of the major TV stations in the area. I wondered how safe the anchors felt coming in and out of their buildings. The photo at the top is the Lowe's where we usually go. And there's another grocery store in that lot, and a McDonald's and a bank. But it's not a great picture because it was raining when I took it. But as you can see, shopping center closed, and more soldiers with more weapons. The photo on the right was taken when we went to take my sister to a doctor's appointment. They are steps from the Liberty Bell, a few blocks away from the Liberty Bell. It just doesn't seem possible. I can't believe this is where we are as a nation. And yet, here we are. If anything is going to change, we have to be the ones to change it. All of us. We can't wait for others to do it. We have to do something. All week I thought, how can I encourage the folks at First Church? How can I stir them to action? How can I make clear the seriousness of this time and the need for action? And then I got an email from one member that laid it all out there. So today, I'm going to let him speak some words to you.
Congregation of First U Cincinnati, I appeal to you today not as a youth, not as a Korean, and not as a white, but as a citizen of the absolute mess that is the United States right now. After the killing of George Floyd and the subsequent protests, looting, and riots, my state of mind is disappointed but not surprised. As I've grown up, I've witnessed our country become more and more politically polarized and hateful. For as long as I've paid attention, it seems that informed and respectful political debate where both parties are open to new ideas are nearly impossible to find, even within our own government. So, when I see videos of police officers committing felonies only to go unpunished, looters beating homeless people in the streets, or the president holding a Bible like it's dirty underwear to scare people out of their First Amendment rights, I am disappointed but not surprised. The murder of George Floyd has sparked protests, yes, but he unknowingly acted as a martyr for a movement that may very well define 2020. In the time since the country was founded, African Americans and other minorities have been kidnapped, enslaved, raped, beaten, segregated, appropriated, profiled, stereotyped, and systematically beaten down. If you thought it ended with the emancipation of slavery, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, or the election of the first black president, you're wrong. Racism is still alive and well today. These protests are now against a government and society that only pretend to care about African Americans. People all over the world are angry and determined to make a change, and now is the time for that change. However, some people have taken the protests as an opportunity to loot and riot, and they are not indicative of the movement. There is no excuse for smashing windows of any business, corporate or small, and stealing goods from the store. They delegitimize the peaceful protests and give police an excuse to beat, pepper spray, gas, or shoot protesters. Whether looters are outside parties, opportunistic people that don't care about the movement, or protesters that let their anger get the best of them, they are a small part of a whole. Even so, cops don't care. In many cases, they even send in undercover officers to incite violence or cause destruction. Police have been running people over, preventing peaceful protesters from going home before curfews, covering badge numbers, turning off body cams, and arresting whoever they feel like, then holding those same people in fenced-off parking lots in handcuffs for hours and hours without food, water, or someplace to go to the bathroom. I even saw a video of a police officer in Indianapolis groping a woman right in front of clearly marked cameras and reporters. If I were to see any of these videos out of context, I would think it was from a third world dictatorship. So, I say all of this not to scare you, but to encourage you. There is a burning need for change right now. As easy as it is to become cynical and jaded, we must have hope. We must act as a congregation. You can join me in writing in favor of de-escalation training, more vetting for police officers, or body camera requirements to Rob Portman, Sherrod Brown, or the representative from your district. You can donate to racial justice organizations like Black Lives Matter, Equal Justice Initiative, or the NAACP. For something more specific to Unitarian Universalists, you can join UU The Vote, an organization working on mobilizing UUs to engage in electoral work focusing on UU principles. My parents told me that as important as protests are, nothing can change without political action. So, let's get to work.
You heard him. It's time to get to work. That was amazing. I hope that we hear more from Park and from others as we go forward. If you have a message on justice that you want to share with the congregation, let me know, and we'll figure out how to make that happen. And now I want to take a step back for just a minute. Way back to 2018, before the pandemic, before the insurrection and the rat, before the stalker, way back to 2018, during my ministerial onboarding, you drew pictures of the kind of place you wanted First Church to be. Those pictures showed a diverse, multicultural, intergenerational, happy place with lots of activities and joyful, fulfilling worship. Do you remember that? Well, there's a story I want to share with you. It's a story about exactly that kind of church. It's called A Church for All. Sunday waking. Day is breaking. Let's go to our church for all. Church bells ringing, joyful noises, choir singing, laughing voices, candles glowing, banners flowing. Come enter our church for all. Weak and healthy, neat and messy. poor and wealthy, plain and dressy. All embracing, spirit gracing, each one at our church for all. Bodies wiggling, mommies reading, children giggling, daddies pleading. Toddlers flailing, babies wailing. There's room at our church for all. Hands receiving, hands connecting. Hearts believing, hearts accepting. Feel the Spirit. Can you hear it? It's here at our church for all. This is a real church, the Church for All. The story was written about Glide Memorial United Methodist Church in San Francisco, an intentionally diverse, multicultural, intergenerational congregation in an urban environment. How did they do it? Could we do something like that here? Well, you've heard about opening hearts at First Church. And I learned over the last couple of weeks that many of you say you still don't know what it is. Well, I'm going to tell you. Opening Hearts is an initiative of the Board of Trustees and the minister at First Church. And its mission is to do 4 things. To provide education and support for individuals to uncover and resolve their own biases toward people who are different. 2, to raise awareness and understanding of these issues in our congregation and in our community. 3, to connect with and learn how to be allies, accomplices, and advocates for those who are oppressed. And 4, to ensure that First Church is physically and spiritually welcoming and accessible to all who come through our doors. And we're doing that by looking at 5 areas. Ableism and accessibility, race, class, sexual orientation and gender identity, and multiculturalism. I've invited the Opening Hearts team to tell you more about each of these areas.
AIM, Accessibility and Inclusion Ministry. Why is it important that we focus on this? Why should we pay even more attention now, during a pandemic? Because like other marginalized groups, people with disabilities are disproportionately affected by this disaster. Just imagine the 3 most basic guidelines everyone hears to stay safe. Wear a mask, stay 6 feet away from others, and wash your hands. Let's look at the first one. Wear a mask. Think about how that impacts the deaf community, where many rely on reading lips. If everyone wears a mask, they are cut off from knowing what is being said. Secondly, stay 6 feet away from others. People in the blind-deaf community rely on touch for their communication. What happens if they can't touch their interpreters anymore? Or how about people who need home health aides for their daily needs? Relying on other people to get in and out of your wheelchair adds a whole other level of risk. And lastly, wash your hands. Frequent hand washing is not always possible for people with certain types of physical disabilities. Add to this the mental anguish of actually getting sick. Research on past pandemics shows that people with disabilities find it harder to access critical medical supplies, which can become even more challenging as resources become scarce. The AIM program in our church raises awareness for these and many other issues. This spring, the AIM team completed 2 surveys to look at our own church. We looked at the accessibility of our building and how we include everyone in our activities. Based on our accessibility survey, we noted some improvements to make. Until we started to pay attention, we never noticed that our doorbell wasn't accessible to someone in a wheelchair. It is also difficult for someone in a wheelchair to open our front door by themselves. How can we be welcoming to all when some people can't get even into our building? We also realized that in case of an emergency, people with mobility issues only have one exit, through the front door. All the other exits require the use of stairs. Thanks to our Building Security Improvement Grant, these issues will be resolved within the next year. When it comes to inclusion, we already made some small improvements. We started providing large orders of service and stressing the need for microphones for group meetings. The stone ritual, when we were still in the church building, was also adjusted to include people with mobility issues. We still have more work to do on really focusing on the intersectionality of disability and other social justice issues. Our church is definitely not perfect yet, but the AIM team will keep working on making our church as accessible and inclusive as possible.
Our chalice remaining lit, I have considered the events of our last weeks, as we all agreed to do at Reverend Connie's request. I am thinking of our opening hearts pillar of racism. I ask myself, what is our duty to do? What labor is mine? Several conclusive facts present themselves to me. First, I no longer think of our column as being racism, quote unquote. It is a trite and inadequate title. I now call it for myself the unraveling of white supremacy. Yes, I do understand that I need to be a listener with people of color before I'm a speaker. Yes, I do understand that I need to be on the alert for microaggressions and statements of racial aggressions from myself as well as others. But more important, my mission is to discover and minimize, wherever possible, my collaborations with systemic white supremacy, both financial and social. Second, I am frustrated to notice, too late, that in an apparent act of diversion, rather than welcoming new people of all creeds and colors to First Church, we drove many away from our doors over an outrageous conflict over church polity. A polity that is the very hearth and home of elitist, white, UU privilege. We are less colorful than we were just a few months ago. Our struggle over our privileged methods of decision-making and financial stewardship is defeating at least one pillar of Opening Hearts, if not hindering all of them. Third, I can't breathe either. I'm shocked to discover that some in First Church failed to understand the intersectionality of a stalker, a pandemic, an insurrection, and a rat with I can't breathe. Not just for Reverend Connie's sake, but for all of us as well. They are not separate messages. She didn't pivot. They belong together. Compartmentalizing each of them strips us of our responsibility to respond to her call. We need to get the knee off the neck of Reverend Connie's Cincinnati ministry. Last, the pandemic. I know that we must find ways to be allies, if not accomplices, in the efforts of freedom organizations like Black Lives Matter. We must stop the killing of black men and women and reform police militaristic tactics. But the pandemic has newly exposed the blatant unfairness of the American economy. Essential workers' lives, many of which are black, are being sacrificed to the growing wealth of white-owned business and industry. The pandemic is actually an opportunity to change it. As the new economy is created out of lockdown, it is necessary to make it far more fair. The next electoral months and the legislative work that follows them are critical to this new opportunity. My work, our work, in the pillar of racism, that is, in the pillar of unraveling white supremacy, is to continue to share and learn from each other as it has for the last year. But now we have a lot more work to do.
One of the more difficult topics in our Opening Hearts work is understanding social class. Understanding how classism works is difficult. Class oppression is multi-layered and it intersects with social justice, racial justice, sexual identity politics, and ableism in many confusing and invisible ways. For Unitarian Universalists, the politics of class can be a major blind spot. Many of us grew up with the mythology that America is an exceptional country, a land of unlimited opportunity for anyone who wants to work hard. Another part of that national myth is that social class is meaningless in the American context. Whether we want to or not, we believe both of these myths in our hearts and minds. So it is hard to believe our eyes when we see the gross social and economic inequalities that are created by our economic system and way of life. The reality of American life is that 58% of Americans have less than $1,000 in savings. 2/3 of Americans, or 66% of us, would have a difficult time paying for a $400 emergency. And in a city like Cincinnati, the majority of our children live in such poverty that they are frequently hungry. This is hardly the picture of a land of opportunity that has erased class oppression. In our Opening Hearts work on classism, we have worked with the Adult Faith Development Committee to hold workshops called Examining X. In our first workshop, we looked at the economics of reparations. Next, we looked at class and cultural bias regarding Appalachians with a screening and discussion of the movie Hillbilly. And lastly, we held a workshop tackling the issue of class head-on. We planned another session on social class, but the pandemic made that impossible to do right now. Examining Social Class Session 2 will be scheduled sometime this fall. As we move into this new church year, we will be planning more opportunities for us to explore how classism and class bias impacts all our efforts to be true to our Unitarian and Universalist convictions. Our faith demands nothing less of us.
Good morning. This week, one of our members shared with the congregation their gender identity. It was a proud and glorious and courageous moment for all of us. Know that other members of all ages in our congregation wrestle with the same question and need the same affirmation from us. And that's especially true during COVID-19 when people are feeling distanced and lonely. But now I want to jump back to the inclusion workshop in 2017. We discovered that we had gaps in our inclusion and that one of the largest was around gender identity. Opening Hearts and church committees have worked intentionally to change that. Worship routinely includes sermons, readings, and music related to gender identity. The membership committee asks all of us to declare our personal pronoun preferences on our name badges. Our newsletter notes important LGBTQ history. Adult and Family Faith Development work with us on book discussions and speakers relevant to all ages. Our long-standing support of Pride Week continues, and this year's parade has been postponed to October the 3rd because of the pandemic. We are working to regain welcoming congregation certification. It is now an annual process intended to assure year-round church resources and support to LGBTQ members. A big game changer for us is a national UUA workshop on how congregations can be more welcoming to transgender persons. A year ago, 6 First Church members attended a workshop hosted by St. John's. This year, we worked with the UUA to redesign that workshop to be open to churches citywide across denominations. COVID has delayed the event. To be transparent, Opening Hearts asked Endowment Fund for $500 to purchase that UUA workshop curriculum. And that request is what triggered a major controversy in our congregation. It raises important questions for us to answer about how we live into our UU faith. Nevertheless, the workshop has already led to new relationships with other trans support groups in town. So in closing, the Opening Hearts LGBTQ team, all 5 of us, thank all of you for doing the hard work of looking into your own hearts, not just your heads, to be sure that everyone feels welcome when they walk through our doors on Linton Street and on Zoom. Thank you.
Opening Hearts and Multiculturalism. You've heard so far about the big ones: accessibility and ability, class, LGBTQ plus status, and race. These are all different types of cultures, but there are many more here at First Church. For example, most of our members are older. Balancing the interests and needs of our older members against those of our younger members and families with small children is a challenge for us. Are there ways we can be welcoming and accommodating for both? What about people with differing theological beliefs? Are we as welcoming to Christians and those who believe in God as we are to humanists, Muslims, Buddhists, atheists, and agnostics? And then there are issues of ideological and political diversity. Do we assume everyone in our space votes the same way we do, or shares the same beliefs on issues such as immigration and environmental justice? These are just a few of the things for us to consider as part of our Opening Hearts work. Over the coming year, we'll have many opportunities to identify and explore the many cultures here at First Church and the ways that we can be more inclusive and welcoming to all who walk through our doors.
Thank you to Jane, Linnea, Tim, Patricia, and David for doing those wonderful testimonials on Opening Hearts. You'll hear much more about the work of Opening Hearts as the year continues. If you have questions about it or want to participate in planning, being part of one of the pillar teams, please let me know. Thank you. At this time, we have to do a little bit of business, and I will let you know that there are many ways to give to First Church to fund the work that we do inside and outside these walls. You can text the word GIVE to 513-717-7377. You can click the Give Now button on Breeze. You can give at our website, firstuu.com, or mail a check to 536 Linton Street, Cincinnati, Ohio, 45219. Thank you for your support of the important work we do here.
Dear people, we feel we need to empathize with the collective when many assume that we are dangerous to this earth. Dangerous to a point where we are too caught up in demeaning our worth. Dangerous to where those listening to the prejudiced thoughts that society produces become abused either physically, verbally, or even psychologically. But who really loses? Many are left with mental bruises, hateful ideologies, and our values suffer as a result. Discrimination oozes out of all of us because of our internalized, biased views which lead to stereotypes and assumptions. We ask people to forgive themselves, and with love, compassion, and empathy, we can heal ourselves. However, we do fail to respect how uniquely diverse humanity is. But let's imagine, for a moment, a world with no color of variation. How would that look? People neglect the beauty of diversity until it is socially accepted. But how many have been disrespected? Well, let me tell you that we are all human beings. And I mean, we literally exist in a human body. We are human. We eat, we work, we sleep, and we live in a likeness. But sometimes it is easy to disregard someone as being no one or other. Everyone just wants to be treated like someone. Our environment is constantly evolving, but our acceptance is at a halt. But we should be giving people love and respect as a form of nourishment for their bodies and minds. Why is it so dangerous to tell people that? Race, class, gender, sexuality, and ability, these are the limits that bound our social mobility to the bottom down. People are left bloodied on the ground because discrimination doesn't sleep. It's an ongoing phenomenon year-round. And people hate. For what? A gender pronoun? Discrimination is realistic. But let's say no to closed-mindedness and hope for the optimistic. Discrimination has never led people in the right direction. But what are we as people really fearful of? The danger that people's prejudices are poison? Is it our sexuality, our gender, our race, our class, and our abilities that get many bothered? Just because we have the audacity to call your discrimination corruption, and then when we demand progress, you give us nothing. To the powers that exist today, if you don't think discrimination is a threat, then we dare people to ask what's coming next. Because the powerful wouldn't like to see a revolution coming. They will become stressed because of the consequences that will persist. In their minds creeps thoughts of the oppressed feeling lesser than human. Their consciousness calling back to them, wondering if they did their best. Many see discrimination, but the fact is discrimination can be rejected, but it can't be ignored. So we are dangerous to future generations. We're dangerous because we let our differences become dividers instead of beacons of unification. We're dangerous because we give attention to stereotypes and very little to how everyone on this earth just hopes to go to sleep at night. We're dangerous because we give attention to bigotry and negative prejudices instead of healing and positivity. There's discrimination against humanity, but how many people have seen we for we? Discrimination is known socially, economically, sexually, racially, and even in ability. As humans, we just want love and respect and to just be free. We're dangerous, and we have destroyed our world with the media's imagery of toxic masculinity and the lack of inclusion with gender and sexual fluidity. We're so dangerous, we didn't even realize the threat to our own identity. You know what? We're not dangerous or a liability. This societal norm is not validated. We can still keep our sanity intact. To preserve our dignity is considered the people's responsibility. A world with no more discrimination can still be a possibility, because truth has to be acknowledged in order for many to reclaim their humanity. And until we attempt to acknowledge the problem, how can humans ever mend their hearts, minds, and spirits? As people, we need to understand the root of discrimination. The actions taken against discrimination will change the future of our nation and world. People deserve love. We must stand together and not apart to change our thoughts and realize our differences but sameness as a humankind. We are an ancestor's bloodline. Our fabric is connected and all acts of discrimination are intertwined. But now it's time, because discrimination functions through poverty and racism. Whether you're a POC, LGBT+, disabled, white, or any other sentient being, your consciousness is worthy of healing. To the hearts and minds willing, discrimination will begin disappearing. But if people don't collectivize, discrimination won't die. As people, ending discrimination is worth a try. Stand up for who you are. Rise. Show the love in your eyes. We, the people, want liberation and demand salvation. Be the catalyst to a better civilization. Be the end to discrimination. Don't be dangerous.
We're not dangerous. We just want to be free. We just want to live in peace. When I was a little girl, our youth choir used to sing, "Let there be peace on earth." That song, especially the last line, "Let there be peace on earth and let it begin with me," has been on my mind a lot this week. If we want to make change in the world, we have to start somewhere. Because after all, we are the world. Each of us. We're not just members or staff or visitors or the minister or the board of the First Unitarian Church of Cincinnati. As UUs, we're not just congregants. We're employers. We're police officers. We're doctors and lawyers and activists. We are members of communities. We are the people who elect state, local, and national leaders. We are the citizens of our cities, our states, and of the United States. We are citizens of the world. If we truly hope for peace on earth, if we truly hope to have that intentionally diverse and welcoming congregation, we have to start somewhere. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Let me check myself. Am I part of the solution, or am I part of the problem? Am I an oppressor? Am I living with a truly open heart, or am I still held back by my own biases and prejudices? Is my heart open to change and transformation? This is not a one-shot deal. This is not a read one book and you're done kind of work. That's not what this is. It's ongoing work, and it's hard work. It's work that we all must do if we truly want that intentionally diverse and vibrant multicultural community. If we truly want peace on our streets, if we truly want justice, equity, and inclusion, if we truly want peace on earth, it must begin with each of us. We must do our work. And so, this week, again, I'm not going to extinguish the chalice. We're going to leave the chalice lit. And this week, I am encouraging each of you to begin your work. If you haven't already started, begin your work. We must start somewhere. Amen.